They told us it was about Jerusalem. They told us it was holy. But what if everything we've been told about the First Crusade was a lie? In the winter of 1095, as snow blanketed the lands of Christendom, a frail man in white robes stepped forward in Clermont, France, and changed the course of history. Pope Urban II, trembling not from age, but from the weight of ambition, raised his voice and declared, "God wills it." Those words echoed across Europe like a divine trumpet, summoning lords, knights, and peasants alike to march east. Not for gold, not for power, but for God. Or so they believed. They left behind families, burned their fields, and pledged their lives to a cause they barely understood. The Holy Land had to be freed, they were told. Jerusalem must be taken back from the infidel. But beneath the veneer of righteousness, hidden behind the crimson of the cross stitched onto their tunics, lay a darker truth, one too dangerous for the world to know. Why Jerusalem? Why now? The city had changed hands many times before. Christians had lived and even worshipped there under Muslim rule for decades. Pilgrims still journeyed to the Holy Sepulchre. There had been no great massacre, no genocide, no expulsion. In fact, most historical records suggest relative tolerance. So what was Pope Urban II really after? The answer begins not in the East, but within the heart of the West. By the late 11th century, the Catholic Church was fractured. Its authority was questioned. Kings and emperors were growing more defiant. Urban II himself was barely holding on to power, locked in a bitter struggle with the German Emperor Henry IV over who had the right to appoint bishops, the infamous investiture controversy. Rome was bleeding from within. Urban needed a miracle, or better yet, a war far from home, a war that would unite the nobility under his banner, a war that would distract Europe's warlords from tearing each other apart and, instead, direct their violence outward, in the name of God. But to convince them, he needed a symbol, a place so drenched in spiritual significance that even the bloodiest of men would feel compelled to shed tears and blood for it. Jerusalem was the perfect bait. Yet there's more. Dig deeper and you uncover a chilling strategy. The Pope knew that vast lands lay between France and the Holy Land, lands controlled by the Byzantine Empire. Emperor Alexios I had sent desperate letters to Rome, begging for mercenaries to defend his crumbling frontiers against the Seljuk Turks. Urban saw an opportunity not just to help Byzantium, but to subjugate it. If Western armies marched east under the authority of the Pope, they could rescue Orthodox Christians, and in doing so, expand papal influence into the East. One church, one Pope. Not just Rome's supremacy, but Urban's own supremacy. The First Crusade wasn't a pilgrimage. It was an invasion, planned, deliberate, and deeply political. But this twisted game did not unfold as Urban had hoped. The People's Crusade, a rabble of tens of thousands led by the erratic Peter the Hermit, descended into chaos. Before even reaching Anatolia, they pillaged Christian cities, massacred Jews along the Rhine, and were ultimately annihilated by Turkish forces. It was a disaster, a holy war baptized in innocent blood. Then came the real armies, the nobles, the seasoned knights, men like Bohemond of Taranto, Raymond of Toulouse, and Godfrey of Bouillon. These were not pilgrims. These were warlords with private ambitions, marching under the cloak of holiness but seeking land, wealth, and titles. At Antioch, a Christian city, the Crusaders besieged and starved their own brothers in faith. When they finally took it, they slaughtered the inhabitants indiscriminately. The same happened again, and worse, when they reached Jerusalem. In July 1099, the Crusaders breached the walls of the Holy City. What followed was not a sacred liberation, but a bloodbath. Christians, Jews, and Muslims alike were butchered in the streets. Blood ran through the alleys knee-deep. Eyewitnesses described bodies burning, babies impaled on spears, entire communities wiped from existence, all under the shadow of the cross. And Pope Urban? He never lived to see Jerusalem fall. He died 2 weeks after the city's capture, unaware, perhaps, of the scale of the slaughter. Or maybe he knew exactly what would happen, because Jerusalem was never the goal. The goal was power, control, a unified Christendom with the Pope at its head, its enemies drowned in blood, and its soldiers convinced they were marching toward heaven, while they built an empire on earth. And the lie? It worked. For centuries, the myth of the Holy Crusade endured. Statues were raised, churches were built, songs were sung about brave knights and holy missions. But behind the hymns and stained glass windows was the stench of betrayal. Urban II had engineered a spiritual smokescreen, a crusade not of salvation, but of manipulation. Even the title Crusade itself was retroactively applied. The early warriors did not see themselves as crusaders. They were penitents, warriors of penance, told that killing for God would cleanse their sins, that one journey eastward could save their souls from damnation. How convenient! A lifetime of sin, forgiven with a single campaign of bloodshed. The First Crusade was not about liberating Jerusalem. It was about redirecting chaos, about controlling kings through fear and glory, about reshaping the map of Europe and the East under one man's vision. Urban did not lie once. He lied with every step, with every sermon, with every blessing, and yet history remembers him as a hero. The real tragedy is not only in the deaths, the betrayals, or the destruction. It is in the silence that followed, in the stories that were never told, in the voices of those massacred, in the tears of pilgrims who discovered too late that their journey had nothing to do with God, and everything to do with power. So next time you hear the words Holy War, ask yourself, who made it holy, and why? Because sometimes the bloodiest lies are told in whispers from the pulpit.